Richard Holloway stood in front of the glass door of what was supposed to be Phuket Property Partners, the investment firm where he'd placed $400,000 of his life savings. The office was empty. Not just closed for the day, completely empty. No furniture, no computers, no files, just bare walls and dust on the floor, visible through the glass. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone and called June's number for the 47th time that week. It went straight to a message in Thai that he couldn't understand. He tried her email, her Line account, her Facebook profile. Everything was either disconnected or deleted. Rick stood there in the midday Thai heat, sweat pouring down his face, and felt his legs weaken. He'd wired $400,000 to this company 3 weeks ago. June had shown him this very office, introduced him to lawyers, showed him contracts and land documents. How could it all just vanish? But as devastating as that moment was standing in front of an empty office, realizing he'd been scammed out of his entire retirement savings, Rick had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The money was gone, yes. But June had taken something else, something that would turn Rick from victim into suspect, and would nearly destroy what remained of his life. To understand how Rick Holloway ended up here, we need to go back 10 months earlier to a networking dinner at a beachfront restaurant in Phuket, where Rick first met the woman who would systematically dismantle his entire existence. If you've been enjoying the stories I create, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel and helps me dedicate time to making these videos despite my commitment to a full-time job. Thank you for being here. Richard Holloway had spent 30 years building his real estate agency in Phoenix, Arizona. He'd started with nothing, a newly licensed agent in his 20s, cold calling potential clients, showing houses in the brutal Arizona heat, working 7 days a week to make his mark in a competitive market. By the time he was 40, Rick owned his own agency with 12 agents working under him. By 50, he had 3 offices across Phoenix and Scottsdale. He was successful by any measure: a 6-figure income, a comfortable house, respect in his community. His personal life had been less successful. He'd married young, to a woman named Sandra who'd grown increasingly resentful of his long working hours. They'd had no children, which Rick regretted, but Sandra seemed relieved about. The marriage ended when Rick was 47, a quiet divorce with no drama, but also no real sadness. They'd simply grown apart. After the divorce, Rick threw himself even deeper into work. He dated occasionally, but nothing serious. He told himself he was married to his business, that success was enough. But at 60, after 30 years of relentless work, Rick woke up one morning and realized he was exhausted. Exhausted by the stress, the competition, the constant hustle. He looked at his life: no wife, no children, no hobbies beyond work, and decided it was time for a change. He sold his real estate agency in December 2023 for $1.2 million. After taxes and paying off the last of his business debts, Rick walked away with $900,000. Combined with his existing savings and investments, he had approximately $1 million, enough to retire comfortably anywhere in the world. Rick had always loved Thailand. He'd vacationed there twice, once in his 30s, once in his 50s, and had fallen in love with the beaches, the food, the relaxed pace of life, the friendly people. He'd read articles about American retirees living in Thailand on a fraction of what they'd spend in the US. $1 million could last decades if he was smart about it. In January 2024, Rick booked a 3-month exploratory trip to Thailand. He wanted to see if he could actually live there, not just vacation. He flew into Bangkok, spent a few days adjusting to the heat and chaos, then took a flight to Phuket, the island he'd loved during his previous visits. Rick rented a villa in Nai Harn Beach for 35,000 baht per month, about $1,000. It was beautiful. 2 bedrooms, a pool, walking distance to the beach. In Phoenix, a comparable property would cost $5,000 monthly. Rick immediately felt he'd made the right decision. He spent his first weeks settling in, exploring Phuket, meeting other expats at various bars and restaurants. The expat community was large and diverse: British, German, Scandinavian, Australian, and plenty of Americans. Most were retirees like Rick, though some were younger digital nomads or business owners. Rick joined an expat networking group that met monthly at a beachfront restaurant in Patong. These dinners attracted 50 to 70 people: expats, business owners, property developers, and locals who worked with foreigners. It was at the third dinner Rick attended, in late February, that he met June. She wasn't what he expected from a Thai woman at these events. Most of the Thai women present were wives or girlfriends of expat men, often much younger than their partners. June was different. She sat alone, dressed in professional attire, a tailored blazer and slacks, and she was engaged in a serious conversation with two European men about property law when Rick first noticed her. During the mingling portion of the evening, Rick found himself at the bar next to her. She smiled politely, but didn't engage him romantically or flirtatiously. Instead, she handed him a business card. Pattaya Thonglor, the card read, Property Consultant Phuket Property Partners. "You're in real estate?" Rick asked, genuinely interested. "In a way," June said in perfect English with only a slight accent, "I help foreigners navigate Thai property law. Many people come here wanting to invest, and they get cheated because they don't understand the restrictions or they trust the wrong people. I was in real estate myself," Rick said. "In Phoenix. Just sold my agency and retired here." June's eyes showed interest. Not romantic interest, but professional curiosity. "Then you understand how important good legal structure is for property investment. In Thailand, it's even more complicated because foreigners can't own land, but there are legal ways to invest that protect your money if you work with the right people." They talked for 20 minutes about property law, investment opportunities, the pitfalls that foreigners faced. June was knowledgeable, professional, and didn't ask Rick any personal questions about his money or his relationship status. She simply discussed the business of property in Thailand like a colleague. Before the evening ended, June said, "If you're serious about investing in Phuket property, you should come to my office. I can show you the legitimate opportunities and explain the structures we use to protect foreign investors. No obligation, just information." Rick took her card and agreed to visit. He liked that she was professional, that she hadn't flirted or tried to charm him. She seemed like someone he could trust, a rarity in a place where many people were trying to separate foreigners from their money. Rick visited June's office 3 days later. Phuket Property Partners was located in a modern building in Patong, with glass doors, air-conditioned reception, and professional signage. The office had 3 employees visible: June, a younger Thai woman at the reception desk, and a Thai man working at a computer. June gave Rick a presentation about investment opportunities in Phuket. She showed him charts about tourism growth, property value appreciation, rental yields. She explained the legal structures using Thai companies with proper shareholder agreements, using long-term leases, using nominee structures carefully to stay within the law. "The key is transparency," June emphasized. "Many foreigners lose money because they let a Thai girlfriend put property in her name, or they use illegal structures that get challenged. We only work with legal frameworks that will hold up in court." Rick was impressed. This wasn't some bar girl asking for money to buy a house for her family. This was a professional consultant discussing legitimate investment strategies. Over the next 3 weeks, Rick met with June 4 more times. They always met at her office or at restaurants for lunch. The conversations were primarily about business, property markets, potential investments, legal structures. But gradually, they became more personal. June told Rick about her background. She'd grown up in Bangkok, gone to university there, studied business and English. She'd moved to Phuket 5 years ago to work in the tourism industry, eventually starting her own consulting firm to help foreigners invest properly. "I've seen too many good people lose money to scammers," June said during one lunch. "That's why I started this business, to give foreigners honest advice." Rick found himself attracted to June, but not in an obvious way. She was intelligent, accomplished, close to his age bracket at 35. She wasn't trying to charm him or manipulate him. She seemed genuinely interested in helping him understand Thailand better. After their 5th meeting, June suggested something unexpected. "Rick, would you like to have dinner sometime? Not business, just dinner. I think we've become friends, and I'd like to know you better outside of property discussions." Rick agreed, surprised and pleased. They had dinner at an upscale restaurant in Kata Beach. The conversation flowed naturally about their lives, their experiences, their hopes for the future. June was easy to talk to. Funny, insightful. "I don't date much," June admitted over dessert. "Thai men often feel intimidated by a woman who's educated and has her own business. Foreign men usually want a young girl they can control. You're different. You treat me like an equal." "That's because you are an equal," Rick said honestly. "You're more than that. You're impressive. You've built something real here." They began seeing each other regularly. Dinners, beach walks, cultural outings. The relationship developed slowly, naturally. June never asked Rick for money. She always paid for herself, sometimes insisting on paying for both of them. She lived in a nice condo that she owned, drove a decent car, seemed financially independent. 6 weeks after they'd started dating, Rick mentioned that he was thinking seriously about investing some of his retirement savings in property. "I could help you with that," June said carefully. "But I don't want to mix business with our relationship. If you want to invest through my company, that's fine, but we should keep it completely professional and separate from us personally." Rick appreciated her caution. It made him trust her more. "What kind of opportunities are you seeing right now?" Rick asked. June explained that her company had access to a new resort development project on the eastern side of Phuket. It was being developed by a Thai corporation that was looking for foreign investment partners. The structure was completely legal. Investors would own shares in the Thai company that owned the property, not the land itself. The development would include luxury villas for rent to tourists, with projected returns of 15% annually. "Is 15% realistic?" Rick asked skeptically. "For well-located short-term rentals in Phuket, yes," June said. "I can show you the projections, the market analysis, comparable properties, but I won't pressure you. You should do your own research." Over the next 2 weeks, June provided Rick with extensive documentation, property surveys, company registration documents, projected rental income based on similar properties, even reviews and financial statements from comparable developments. Everything looked legitimate and professional. She introduced Rick to 2 lawyers who supposedly worked with her company, a Thai lawyer named Somchai and a British expat lawyer named David. Both seemed professional, answered Rick's questions thoroughly, explained the legal structure in detail. "The key is that your shares are properly documented and that the shareholder agreement protects your interests," David explained. June's company has done this structure many times successfully. Rick did his own research online. He found June's company registered properly with Thai authorities. He found positive reviews from other foreigners who'd worked with Phuket property partners. He found articles June had written about property investment that were published on reputable expat websites. Everything checked out. In early May, after 3 months of dating June and 2 months of researching the investment opportunity, Rick made his decision. He would invest $400,000 in the resort development project. "Are you absolutely sure?" June asked when Rick told her. "That's a lot of money, Rick. I don't want you to do this because of our relationship. This needs to be a purely business decision." "It is," Rick assured her. "I've done my research. The numbers make sense, and I trust your company's structure." The investment process took 2 weeks. Rick wired $400,000 to a Thai business account that was supposedly held jointly by the investment company and the foreign investors. He received official-looking contracts, signed multiple documents, received share certificates that appeared legitimate. June remained emotionally distant during the business transaction. "I'm keeping our personal relationship completely separate," she explained. "This is business. We're business partners now, and I'll treat you like any other investor." Rick appreciated her professionalism. After the transaction was complete, they celebrated with a nice dinner, but June was clear. "Your investment is now in the development process. You'll receive quarterly reports. But let's not talk about business when we're together personally. Let's just enjoy our time." Rick felt incredibly lucky. He'd found a smart, beautiful woman who treated him as an equal, and he'd made what seemed like a solid investment that would provide steady income during his retirement. He'd been in Thailand 4 months, and everything seemed perfect. That should have been his first warning sign. The first indication that something was wrong came in early June, about 3 weeks after Rick's investment. June became harder to reach. She canceled 2 dinner dates, saying she was overwhelmed with work. When they did meet, she seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly. "Is everything okay?" Rick asked. "Just stress with the development project," June said. "Some permit issues, nothing serious. It'll be resolved soon." Rick didn't think much of it. He'd been in real estate long enough to know that development projects always had complications. But then June canceled 3 more dates in a row. Her texts became shorter, less frequent. When Rick asked if something was wrong between them, she assured him everything was fine. She was just incredibly busy. Rick decided to surprise her at her office with lunch. When he arrived at the building in Patong where Phuket Property Partners was located, he found the office door locked. Through the glass, he could see that the interior looked empty. No furniture, no computers, no files. Rick's heart started pounding. He asked the building management what had happened to the office on that floor. "They moved out 2 weeks ago," the manager said in broken English. "Paid last month rent, then left suddenly. No forwarding address." Rick tried calling June. Her phone went straight to an automated message in Thai. He tried texting, messaging online and WhatsApp. No response. He went to her condo building and asked the security guard to ring her unit. No answer. The guard said he hadn't seen her in over a week. Panic rising, Rick went to the address listed for the resort development property. It was an empty lot with construction equipment that looked like it hadn't been used in months. There was no active development, no workers, no signs of any legitimate project. Rick returned to his villa and reviewed every document June had given him. The contracts, the company registrations, the share certificates. He started noticing inconsistencies, stamps that looked slightly off, signatures that might have been forged, company registration numbers that he couldn't verify online. He contacted the 2 lawyers, Sumchai and David. Both phone numbers were disconnected. Their email addresses bounced back. Their supposed law offices didn't exist at the addresses listed on their cards. Rick felt sick. He'd been scammed. He'd given $400,000 to a woman he thought he knew, and now she was gone. The office was empty. The lawyers were fake. The investment was fraudulent. Everything had been an elaborate lie. But Rick wasn't going to just accept the loss. He went to the tourist police in Phuket and filed a detailed report. He brought all his documentation, all his communications with June, everything he could find. The officer who took his report, a middle-aged Thai man who spoke excellent English, listened carefully and made notes. "Mr. Holloway, unfortunately we see cases like this regularly. Foreign men, usually older, who give money to Thai women for various investment schemes or business opportunities. In most cases, the money is gone and the woman disappears." "But I have documentation," Rick protested. "Contracts, company names, addresses. You should be able to track her down." "We will try," the officer said. "But often these identities are fake or stolen. The addresses are temporary. The company registrations are fraudulent. We will investigate, but you should prepare yourself that recovering your money is unlikely." "Just find her," Rick said desperately. "Find June. Her real name is Pattaya Thonglor. She ran Phuket Property Partners." The officer wrote it down, but his expression suggested he'd heard similar stories hundreds of times. Rick left the police station feeling defeated but also angry. He wasn't going to let June get away with this. He hired a private investigator, a British expat who specialized in fraud cases in Thailand. The investigator charged $3,000 up front and promised to find information about June. While Rick waited for the investigator's report, he tried to piece together what had happened. Had everything been fake from the beginning? Had June targeted him specifically at that networking dinner? Had their entire relationship been planned? The investigator called Rick 2 weeks later. "I've found some information, but you're not going to like it." They met at a coffee shop in Patong. The investigator, a man named Roger, showed Rick a folder of documents and photographs. "Pattaya Thonglor isn't her real name," Roger explained. "The woman you knew as June has used at least 4 different identities that I've been able to confirm. She's part of a sophisticated network that targets foreign men, usually retirees or business owners, for romance and investment scams." Roger showed Rick photographs of June with other foreign men, clearly in romantic situations. Some of the photos were dated before Rick had even met her. "She's done this before?" Rick asked, feeling sick. "Many times. I found records of at least 6 other cases similar to yours over the past 3 years, amounts ranging from $50,000 to over $300,000. Different companies, different schemes, but always the same basic pattern. Romance, followed by a business opportunity that seems legitimate. Where is she now?" "I don't know," Roger admitted. "After each scam, she disappears for several months. She might be in Bangkok, might be in another country. She's very careful about covering her tracks." Rick felt crushed. Not only had he lost $400,000, but their entire relationship had been a lie. Every moment they'd shared, every conversation, every touch, all of it had been part of an elaborate con. "There's something else," Roger said, his expression grave. "Something worse than the money." What could be worse than losing $400,000? Roger pulled out another set of documents. While you were dating June, did you give her access to your personal documents? Your passport, driver's license, bank statements? Rick thought back. She made copies of my passport and driver's license when we were setting up the investment. She said it was required for the company registration. Did she have access to your computer, your email? Rick nodded slowly, realizing with growing horror what Roger was suggesting. She stayed at my villa a few times. She could have accessed my laptop while I was sleeping or in the shower. I've found evidence that your identity has been compromised, Roger said. Your passport number, driver's license, and banking information have been used to set up multiple shell companies in Thailand and other Southeast Asian countries. These companies are being used for money laundering operations. Rick felt the room spin. What does that mean? It means that June didn't just steal your money. She stole your identity. You're now connected to a criminal enterprise. Your name is on company registrations for businesses that are likely laundering money for organized crime. But I didn't do anything. I didn't set up those companies. I know that, and hopefully the authorities will figure that out eventually. But right now, on paper, you're a director of several companies involved in suspicious financial activities. That's a serious problem. Roger was right. It was worse than losing the money. Much worse. 3 weeks after Rick's meeting with Roger, 2 men in suits appeared at his villa. They identified themselves as agents from the U.S. Embassy's legal department, working in cooperation with Thai authorities and U.S. federal agencies. Mr. Holloway, we need to ask you some questions about your financial activities in Thailand, one of the agents said. They showed Rick evidence that his name appeared on corporate documents for 5 different companies registered in Thailand, plus 3 more in Malaysia and 2 in the Philippines. These companies had received and transferred millions of dollars in the past 6 months through complex networks of international transactions. I didn't set up any of those companies, Rick protested. My identity was stolen. I was scammed by a woman named June. We're aware of your police report in Phuket, the agent said, but we need to determine whether you were a victim or a participant. The timing is suspicious. You moved to Thailand with substantial savings. You meet someone in the property business. You transfer a large sum of money, and suddenly your identity is connected to multiple shell companies involved in money laundering. I was scammed, Rick said, his voice rising. I lost $400,000 to a woman who disappeared. Or, the other agent said, you could be a participant in a money laundering operation who's now claiming to be a victim to avoid prosecution. Rick felt his world collapsing. He was being investigated as a criminal when he was the victim. The agents informed Rick that his U.S. bank accounts were being frozen, pending investigation. They advised him not to leave Thailand without permission. They took his passport for verification purposes. After the agents left, Rick sat in his villa trying to process what was happening. He wasn't just broke, he was now potentially facing criminal charges. His bank accounts were frozen, his passport was taken, and he was suspected of being involved in international money laundering. Rick contacted an international lawyer who specialized in financial crimes. The lawyer, based in Bangkok, charged a $50,000 retainer. Rick had to beg his sister back in Phoenix to wire him the money, explaining only that he'd been scammed and needed legal help. The lawyer, a British woman named Catherine, reviewed Rick's case thoroughly. You're in a very difficult position, Catherine explained over a video call. On paper, you appear to be connected to a sophisticated money laundering operation. The fact that you also lost money in what you claim is a scam makes you look either like a participant who got double-crossed or like someone trying to create a cover story. But I'm innocent, Rick insisted. I believe you, Catherine said. But proving your innocence will take time. We need to demonstrate that your identity was stolen, that you had no knowledge of these companies, that you were genuinely scammed. That means cooperating fully with investigators, providing all your documentation, and being patient while they verify your story. The investigation took 7 months. 7 months during which Rick couldn't access most of his money, couldn't leave Thailand, couldn't even make plane reservations or hotel bookings because his passport was held by authorities. Rick had to live on the small amount of savings he had in a Thai bank account that wasn't frozen, about $30,000. He moved from his nice villa to a cheap apartment for $600 a month. He watched his savings dwindle as legal fees and living expenses consumed what little he had left. The psychological toll was immense. Rick went from being a successful retiree living his dream in Thailand to being a suspected criminal living in limbo. He couldn't go home, couldn't access his money, couldn't plan his future. Every day was filled with anxiety about whether he'd be arrested, whether he'd ever clear his name, whether he'd end up in prison for crimes he didn't commit. During those 7 months, investigators traced the network of companies that had used Rick's identity. They discovered that June, whose real name was apparently Nat Theta, though even that might have been fake, was part of a sophisticated criminal organization specializing in identity theft and money laundering. They targeted wealthy expats, especially retirees, gaining their trust through romance and fake business opportunities, stealing their identity documents, and then using those identities to create corporate structures for money laundering. Rick's case helped investigators understand the scope of the operation. They found at least 15 other foreign men who'd been similarly victimized, their identities stolen and used to launder money. Some of these men didn't even know it yet because they'd only recently been scammed. Finally, in February 2025, nearly a year after Rick had met June, the investigation concluded. The authorities determined that Rick was indeed a victim rather than a participant. His name was cleared, his passport was returned, and his bank accounts were unfrozen. But by then, Rick had spent nearly $40,000 on legal fees and living expenses. Combined with the $400,000 he'd lost to June's initial scam, he'd lost $440,000. Of his original $1 million retirement savings, he had about $560,000 left, and that didn't account for the year of retirement he'd already spent. The authorities never found June. She'd disappeared, likely operating under yet another identity, probably targeting another unsuspecting foreign man. The company structures using Rick's identity were dismantled, but the money that had been laundered through them was long gone, untraceable through the maze of international transactions. Rick was cleared, but he was not whole. Rick moved from Phuket to Hua Hin, a quieter coastal town further north. He couldn't bear to stay in Phuket, where every street reminded him of June, where every restaurant held memories of their dates, where he'd been humiliated and victimized. In Hua Hin, Rick rented a modest apartment for 12,000 baht per month, about $360. It was nothing like the beautiful villa he'd imagined when he first came to Thailand. It was a simple, one-bedroom place in a Thai neighborhood, far from the beach, with no pool and no view. His monthly budget was tight, with $560,000 left, earning minimal interest, and a social security payment of $2,000 per month. Rick had to be very careful with his spending. The retirement he'd imagined comfortable, adventurous, stress-free, was now a daily exercise in frugality and anxiety. But the financial loss, devastating as it was, wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the psychological damage. Rick had been a successful businessman for 30 years. He'd been confident, capable, proud of his ability to read people and situations. He'd built a thriving real estate agency through good judgment and hard work. June had destroyed that self-image completely. She'd made him doubt everything he thought he knew about himself. How'd he been so blind? How'd he failed to see that everything was a lie? How had he mistaken manipulation for genuine connection? The identity theft added another layer of trauma. For months, Rick had lived under suspicion, treated as a potential criminal, unable to control his own finances or movement. Even after being cleared, he felt violated in a way that the financial scam alone couldn't explain. June hadn't just taken his money, she'd stolen his identity, his reputation, his sense of security. Rick joined an expat support group in Hua Hin for people who'd been scammed in Thailand. The group met weekly in a small cafe, usually attended by 10 to 15 people. Their stories were eerily similar. Foreign men, usually older and financially comfortable, who'd been targeted by Thai women or men in elaborate scams. Some lost money through fake businesses, others through fake emergencies, others through property scams. A few, like Rick, had also had their identities stolen. The thing that haunts me most, Rick shared at one meeting, isn't even the money. It's that I thought I was smarter than this. I'd read the warnings, I'd heard the stories, I knew the red flags, but she was so good at what she did. She never rushed me, never asked for money directly, never fit the profile of a scammer. She played the long game, built real trust, made everything seem legitimate. How do you protect yourself against that? An Australian man named Trevor, who'd lost $200,000 in a similar investment scam, said, "You can't, mate. These people are professionals. They study psychology, they're patient, they're brilliant at manipulation. We weren't stupid, we were targeted by experts. It helped to talk to others who understood, but it didn't erase the shame. Rick's sister in Phoenix knew some of what had happened, but he downplayed the extent of the loss. His ex-wife, Sandra, had heard through mutual friends and had sent one cruel message. "I always knew you were a fool. Glad I got out when I did." Rick had no children to disappoint, but he had friends in Phoenix who he couldn't bear to face. The idea of returning to Arizona and admitting what had happened felt impossible. So, he stayed in Thailand, in his modest apartment, living a quiet life that bore no resemblance to his retirement dreams. He found some purpose through volunteer work. He taught English at a local school for poor Thai children. He volunteered at an animal shelter that rescued street dogs. These activities gave his days structure and meaning, even if they couldn't fill the hole that June's betrayal had left. Rick also became an advocate for scam awareness. He wrote articles for Expat blogs warning newcomers about sophisticated investment scams. He shared his story, anonymously, to help others avoid his mistakes. He wanted something good to come from his disaster. 1 year after meeting June, 2 years after arriving in Thailand, Rick received an unexpected email from Roger, the investigator he'd hired. Roger had continued tracking June's network and had discovered something interesting. June had been arrested in Malaysia under yet another assumed name for running a similar scam on a British businessman. She was currently in custody awaiting trial. "Thought you'd want to know," Roger wrote. "There's no way you'll get your money back. It's long gone through too many hands. But at least she's facing justice for something." Rick felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. Yes, June was arrested, but for a different crime, in a different country, under a different name. The money she'd stolen from Rick was never recovered. The other men she'd scammed were never compensated. The years of pain she'd caused couldn't be undone by one arrest. Still, it was something. Rick printed the news article Roger had sent and kept it in a folder with all the other documents from his case. Evidence that he hadn't imagined it all, that he hadn't been crazy or stupid, that he'd been victimized by a real criminal organization. Rick Holloway is now 63 years old. 3 years have passed since he stood in front of that empty office in Phuket and realized his $400,000 was gone. He still lives in Hua Hin, in the same modest apartment, living carefully on his diminished savings and Social Security. His life is small now, measured and quiet. He teaches English 3 days a week at the local school. He volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. He attends the Scam Survivors Support Group every Thursday evening. He's made a few friends among the expat community, other men who've suffered losses, who understand what it feels like to be betrayed so completely. Rick's story illustrates a disturbing evolution in Thailand scams. June wasn't just a romance scammer looking for quick money. She was part of a sophisticated criminal enterprise that combined romance fraud with identity theft and money laundering. Her operation was carefully planned, professionally executed, and devastatingly effective. The romance was the hook, but the real crime was much larger. By stealing Rick's identity and creating shell companies in his name, June's organization was able to launder money for other criminal enterprises. Rick wasn't just a victim of fraud, he was unwittingly turned into a participant in international crime, nearly losing his freedom as well as his savings. According to Thai authorities and international law enforcement agencies, this type of sophisticated scam is becoming more common. Criminal organizations target expats not just for their money, but for their identities, their passports, their banking information, their credibility as Western business people. These identities are then used to create legitimate-looking corporate structures that facilitate money laundering on a massive scale. Rick's case helped expose one such network, but authorities believe many more exist. The combination of romance, fake business opportunities, and identity theft creates a perfect storm that can destroy victims financially, legally, and psychologically. "She didn't just steal my money," Rick says quietly when he shares his story with newcomers to the support group. "She stole my name. She stole my identity. She turned me into a suspected criminal. For 7 months, I didn't know if I'd end up in prison for crimes I didn't commit. The $400,000, that was devastating. But the identity theft was worse. It stripped away everything I thought I knew about myself, about my judgment, about my ability to navigate the world safely." The psychological scars run deep. Rick admits he has trouble trusting anyone now, especially women. He's closed himself off emotionally, afraid that any kindness or interest from others might be manipulation. He double-checks every interaction, questions every motive, suspects every friendship. "I've become paranoid," Rick acknowledges. "I know it's not healthy, but after what happened with June, after being fooled so completely by someone I thought I knew, I can't help it. I second-guess everything." His relationship with Thailand itself is complicated. He stays because he can't afford to live as well anywhere else with his reduced savings. But the country that once represented paradise and possibility now represents loss and betrayal. Every beautiful beach reminds him of walks with June. Every nice restaurant recalls dinners where he thought he was falling in love. Every successful-looking Thai businesswoman makes him wonder if she's really just another predator looking for the next victim. Rick sometimes thinks about the warning signs he missed. June's reluctance to introduce him to her family, her vague answers about her past, the way she kept their personal relationship separate from the business investment which he'd interpreted as professionalism, but which was really just compartmentalization to avoid emotional complications. But most of the signs weren't there. June was a professional criminal, trained and experienced in manipulation. She didn't fit the typical profile because that's exactly what made her dangerous. She was educated, sophisticated, patient. She invested months in the con. She never asked for money directly. She made everything seem like Rick's idea, his choice, his decision. That's what makes it so hard to accept, Rick says. If she'd been obviously a scammer, if she'd asked for money right away, if she'd claimed some family emergency, if she'd pushed too hard too fast, I would have seen it. But she was smarter than that. She built real trust over time. She made me believe I'd found something rare and genuine. That's what skilled manipulation looks like, and it's almost impossible to defend against. The other men in the support group nod in recognition. They all have similar stories of sophisticated scams that didn't follow the usual patterns. The criminals are evolving, getting better, targeting victims more carefully, and executing their cons more professionally. Rick has tried to rebuild some semblance of a normal life, but he knows he'll never fully recover. The financial loss means he'll work longer, save more carefully, worry constantly about unexpected expenses. At 63, he should be enjoying his retirement. Instead, he's teaching English for extra income and volunteering to fill the lonely hours. The psychological loss is harder to quantify, but perhaps more damaging. Rick lost his confidence, his sense of judgment, his ability to trust. He lost his dreams of an adventurous retirement. He lost his dignity during those 7 months of investigation. He lost pieces of himself that he'll never get back. "People ask me why I don't just go home to America," Rick says. "But what would I go home to? I sold everything to come here. I don't have a house, don't have a business anymore. Most of my friends have moved on with their lives. And honestly, I'm ashamed. Ashamed that I was fooled so completely, that I lost so much, that I nearly ended up in prison for crimes I didn't commit. It's easier to hide here, where most people don't know my story." So Rick stays in Hua Hin, in his modest apartment, living his reduced life. He helps Thai children learn English. He feeds and cares for rescued dogs at the shelter. He shares his story with other victims, hoping to help them process their own trauma. He counts his remaining savings and prays they'll last. Every few months, Rick receives updates from international authorities about the investigation into June's criminal network. A few more victims have been identified. A couple of minor associates have been arrested, but June herself, after her brief arrest in Malaysia, somehow disappeared again. She's out there somewhere, probably using a new name, a new identity, targeting a new victim. "She didn't just steal my money," Rick repeats, because it's the truth he needs people to understand. "She stole my name, my identity, my reputation. She turned my dream retirement into a nightmare. She took everything I'd worked 30 years to build and destroyed it in less than a year. The $400,000 was just money. What she really took was my sense of self, my ability to trust, my future." That's what makes this story worse than a simple scam. It's not just about money. It's about identity theft, about being turned into something you're not, about losing yourself completely to someone else's criminal agenda. Rick's story is a cautionary tale not just about romance scams or investment fraud, but about the evolving sophistication of international crime. As more retirees move abroad seeking better lives, more criminals develop elaborate systems to exploit them. The combination of romance, fake business opportunities, and identity theft creates a perfect trap that's extremely difficult to detect and almost impossible to escape once you're caught. For Rick Holloway, the lesson came too late and cost too much. He sits in his apartment in Hua Hin, 3 years older and infinitely sadder than the confident businessman who first arrived in Thailand with $1 million and a dream. The money is mostly gone. The dream is dead. The man who had it all lost everything, including himself, to a woman who was never who she claimed to be. "She didn't just steal my money," Rick says one more time, as if repetition might somehow make sense of the senseless. "She stole my name." And in that simple statement lies the full horror of what happened to Richard Holloway in Thailand. Not just a financial crime, but an existential one that left him permanently diminished, forever changed, and eternally wary of the world and everyone in it. If this story affected you, please subscribe to this channel for more true stories about sophisticated scams and the real cost of misplaced trust. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing it. Sometimes the greatest protection against scams is simply knowing how advanced and professional they've become. Thank you for watching.